Kurt, when was the last time that you told someone that it would be good for them if they were weird, selfish, or manipulative?
Never. Those are not exactly traits that I'm trying to cultivate in myself or promote in others, Tim.
Yeah, I understand. But maybe, just maybe, it's the way that we're looking at these terms.
Most people need the push, the wild courage to dial these traits up. Most people do not need to dial them back. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, and the desire to people please or to do things like everybody else is doing, which worked great on the savannah. But in this giant world with 8 billion people and at competitive organizations where lots of top performers are to your left and to your right, the way to quote unquote survive that is not on the savannah is to stick out, to be a little bit weird, to be a little bit shameless, and to kick your imposter syndrome to the curb.
So, Kurt, today's guest might change your mind about the virtues of being weird, selfish, shameless, obsessed, nosy, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy. We're talking with Jenny Wood, and she's the author of Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It. She's a former Google executive who's here to help us reframe these supposedly negative terms into powerful tools for success.
Yeah, and I have to say, Jenny brings an interesting perspective to this topic. Her book and our conversation with her showed us how traits like being nosy can actually refer to being insatiably curious, and how being brutal might mean having the courage to say no to things that don't serve your goals or those things that you just don't want to do, right? And we tend to frame these terms as completely negative, but there's really more to the story than just the negative sides for these terms.
Right. And she shares some fascinating stories with us, like how she met her husband by literally chasing him off the subway train, and how she helps people craft better responses to work situations by focusing on you statements instead of I statements.
Which is backwards from everything that I've learned, but we'll let them talk about it as we go in there. What really struck me, Tim, was something that you and I have talked a lot about before, and that's about how we need more window gazing time. And I use air quotes around window gazing. Those moments when we're not constantly busy or distracted, but we actually allow ourselves to let our minds just wander, just to wander and kind of just
Kurt,
what?
Not now.
No,
wandering
sorry.
now.
I was wandering there. Okay, so it allow ourselves to not be focused and not to grind away and to think strategically, right? And she tunes up this phrase as sort of a catch-all for downtime and experiencing life away from your devices. Yeah,
absolutely. And she makes a great point about how being selfish sometimes means protecting your own personal time for working on things that are big, important projects instead of getting caught up in what she calls nap work. That's not nap time, by the way. That's nap work. So that's like NAP stands for not actually promotable activities, right? So this is the sort of thing that we've talked about with Linda Babcock before in episode 293 and Allison Forgale in episode 431. Kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I was thinking nap work because that's how I work. I typically just nap during work time. So that's
lucky you.
Oh, man. Well, Jenny challenges this idea that we should always be grinding and hustling. And instead, she suggests that we sometimes, the most productive thing that we can do is to give ourselves that time to wonder, to think, to plan, to strategize, even take a nap, a real nap, not a real nap. Yeah.
It's really about having the courage to do things differently, isn't it? Like to stand out rather than just blend in, even when that feels uncomfortable. Basically, to find your own groove.
Exactly. And speaking of standing out, wait until you hear her story about the job candidate who landed a position at Google partly because of an unusual line on the resume about the perfect oatmeal raisin cookie recipe.
Definitely worth listening for. a recipe that we should actually try to get.
No, we should. I want to know what that perfect oatmeal raisin cookie is. I like oatmeal raisin cookies, by the way.
Okay, Groovers, we invite you to sit back and relax, not nap, but stay attentive with a courageously crafted pour of your favorite beverage and enjoy our conversation with Jenny Wood. Jenny Wood, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
It's so nice to be here, Tim and Kurt.
It's good to have you here. And we want to get quickly started with speed round question number 1. Would you prefer to learn a new instrument or a new language?
Oh, I want to learn guitar. So new instrument and specifically guitar.
Look at that. Tim is.
You can take lessons from me.
Yeah, he likes that.
Oh, that's so fun.
If you're in the North Carolina region, Tim will give you a few free lessons. There you go.
I love it. My husband is learning guitar, and it is so. I just love that instrument, and so it's so fun to hear him strumming along in the evenings as he's practicing
singing too,
songs.
like singing songs.
He has a great voice. Yeah, we're a big singing family. All 4 of us are big singers.
Oh, love that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love that. Did you grow up with music in your household? Like, were there singing and stuff in your house?
Tim, that comes at the end of the
that's
episode.
The speed round. All right.
This is the speed round. Come on, man.
It's the rapid fire that slowly slowed down.
Yeah, it's never rapid fire, as our listeners know. All right, Jenny, are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
Tea, decaf only. If I drink caffeine, I'm up all night. Like I could have caffeine at 9 a.m. and I perceive that it impacts my sleep. Note, I said perceive that it impacts my sleep.
Okay.
Like placebo effect is real. It impacts you. So if you believe that it does, it even if it's not the caffeine itself, the actual drinking of it can impact your sleep. So there you go. All right.
And I got a whole lot of energy, so I don't really need it. And when I do drink caffeine, it's a little too much for me and for the world. And for all of you listening,
this is my surprise face. Yeah.
There's no surprise on the face, just to be clear.
Not at all. Not with the "you have a lot of energy" comment. No.
Yeah, we've known each other all of 17 minutes, including our pregame here, and there's no surprise. I have a lot of energy.
And that came through really clear, really abundantly. So there you go.
Third speed round question.
Hit me.
In general, which is better, to ask for permission or to ask for forgiveness?
Oh my gosh, forgiveness. Come on, give me a hard one. Wrote a book called Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It. Forgiveness. Boom. Game over.
Perfect. We're coming back to that. We
will come back to that. All right.
Yes.
Last speed round question. And Tim, I'm going off script here. So sorry, man.
Oh no.
Right,
oh no. Look out.
Go. All right. So this is well, I won't say where. Is curiosity a skill that can be learned, or is it just an innate thing that we have?
Yes.
I hope you said yes. It's in your book, so I was like, there's a piece there. Okay. Yes.
I mean, I think most things can be learned, quite frankly. Yes. But the reason I said yes, as in like yes to both. If I had to pick one, it can be learned, but we're born so curious. Right? Yeah. Kids ask so many questions an hour, and adults start to just stifle their opinions and their curiosity and their, desire to know more about things, right? So we stifle it, which means we had it when we were younger because of how many questions kids ask. Why is the sky blue? How does gravity work, right? And then in a meeting with all of our colleagues, we start just getting nervous. But was I already supposed to know that? And I don't want to ask what that acronym stands for. And do I look foolish if I say this or I expose this with my, imperfect amount of knowledge? That it needs to be relearned, I think, is the answer. Curiosity needs to be relearned.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting because you did talk about it as a skill, and it's this element of being able to, as you mentioned, we lose that ability or the confidence in our ability to be inquisitive and to ask questions and to be curious. And it is one of the things that's a common theme that we have had across multitude of our podcasts with the guests that we have, from people talking about negotiation skills to people talking about philosophical elements, about being curious about the world we live in. And it just comes across as this underlying component. And I think it's a really interesting piece of what we're going to be talking about when we're moving forward. So,
okay, I want to bring it back to the book here right now, right, Jenny? You titled the book Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It. And we should start with just a little bit of framing. What's the what you want part? Give us a frame for going after what you want. What's included in what you want? Is it home life, relationships, work? Give us a frame.
I would say the book is 80% going after what you want at work and 20% everything else in life. Friendships, relationships, though it starts with going after what you want from a relationship perspective.
I was going to say, you start the book off with a really fun story.
Very much so.
Why don't you tell that story? And I think that can kind of probably launch people into a little bit about kind of the overall ethos of the book.
Yeah, for sure. So I was riding the subway home from work in 2011 in New York City, and I was sitting there in a totally packed train. And about 20 feet away from me, standing was this really attractive guy. And I was thinking, where's he going? What's he doing? What's he up to? Is he single? But I wasn't going to talk to him on this packed train. It was silent. And even though we've established I have a lot of energy and, tend to go after what I want in life, in that particular moment, I was like, well, I'm not going to talk to him unless he gets off at my stop. But if he does, then I'll talk to him. That's the universe telling me that it was meant to be. So I should talk to him.
Because you're not talking to him at this point. He's actually far away. He's across the train, right? You're not next to each other.
He never saw me. Yeah, no, I only saw his profile. Excellent profile. Excellent profile. Not his dating app profile. Literally the profile of his face.
Yes.
The side view. That was the excellent profile. Okay, so I made a deal with myself. I said, if he gets off at my stop, then I'll strike up a conversation with him. And if not, then say lovey. He gets off at the next stop, not my stop, mind you. And I said, no, screw the universe. I'm running off this train. So what, in that case, what I wanted was anything from a date to a husband. And what I got was the latter. I got a husband. Yeah. So I chased after him. I said, excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but you were on my subway and I thought you were cute. Any chance I could give you my business card? And he took the card. We went out a week later. Had a blast. I knew right away I wanted to marry this guy. And here we are, 11 years and 2 kids later. Yeah. So that was some wild courage.
Congrats.
I love that you said screw the universe and that you had made this deal with yourself. Well, this is the universe telling me if he gets off at this. And that, I think, is the really key component as you're thinking about it. It's like, no, I make the damn, decisions in this world and different pieces of that.
Not fate.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Serendipity isn't found, it's made. And I deeply, deeply believe that. And that is a riff off of the New York Times article that was written about how we met, which ended up going viral and being one of their top, meet cute articles of all time. And the title of the article was Serendipity 1, Spreadsheet 0, because I live my life in spreadsheets as a former Google operations leader. And and I had a spreadsheet of all the dates that I had gone on. Like, no kidding. We don't have to go deep on this.
We are not going to go deep on this, but we should set you up with Logan Ury, I think.
All right. Logan and I will go deep on the dating spreadsheet. But in this case, it was spreadsheet lost out, serendipity 1, and serendipity is not found. It's made.
So can we dive a little bit deeper into the book title?
Sure.
Right. Okay. So it's Wild Courage, Go After What You Want and Get It. Was this an easy title to come up with? Was this like a bottle of bing, bottle of boom? Like, oh, of course, this is it. This I'm working from. Everybody loves it. The editor loves it. The agent loves it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned all those parties because there are so many people when you write a big book with a, traditional publisher, there are a ton of cooks in the kitchen on all these decisions. So the book for 2.5 years was actually called The Chase. And that was based on the Subway story that I just told.
Yeah.
And I loved that title. And the reason it was called that is when I first met my agent, Lisa, who's just phenomenal. The first thing she said to me, because she'd read the New York Times article, she said, Jenny, the name of your book is going to be The Chase. And I was like, oh my gosh, Lisa, there are no two better words in the English language that describe me, because I chase everything I want in life. This gets back to the what, Tim, that you asked about. Like, I chase the promotion. I chase the leadership position. I chase winning the magazine sales contest in 7th grade. I chase getting the part in the play, right? Like, we are, and you are go-getters. You wouldn't be doing this podcast if you weren't. You wouldn't be listening, to all of you listening. If you weren't a go-getter, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast trying to improve yourself. You want more for your life. You want better for your career. You want, optimization for your life. And so, I'm now totally on a tangent that has nothing to do with the title of the book, but people want more, and that's perfectly fine. So, okay. So she said, there are no two words. I said, there are no two words that better describe me than the chase. So I just loved this title. And then everybody had approved it. Everybody had signed off at Penguin Random House. And we're talking like almost 100 people had weighed in at this point. At this point, when we were deciding whether to change it, we were getting all this feedback from the sales team and the marketing team and the PR team, and then my agent and my external editors. And I crowdsourced it. I have a newsletter with 50,000 people. I crowdsourced it.
Wow.
I did polls on across the internet. Anyway, I'm very data driven. And long story short, ultimately, we decided
we're past that.
Yeah, we're totally past that. We decided that that Wild Courage was more optimistic. It was more interesting. It was something that people wanted to aspire to be, and that people don't want to be chased. They want to be, that like they're tired. People want to maybe lean out a little bit. I always want to lean in, but then it was quite an interesting back and forth between me and the publisher about how, do we drop it? And it was hard for me to let go of it. And so I had to be mindful of, in the book, what I call trait traps, which are, when do you take one of these traits too far?
And so what trait, well, actually, let's talk about those traits, because each of your chapters delves into one of these traits, and you have some really great names for them, right? I mean, they're not what we would, well, here, I'll just read
Sure.
them. So weird, selfish, shameless, obsessed, nosy, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy. I don't know if those sound like attributes that I really want to have in my life, but you take them in an interesting way. Can you talk a little bit about those traits?
Yeah. So the goal is to reclaim the language here and to give all of you permission to get uncomfortable with these things that take wild courage, right? Like, it takes wild courage to say, oh, I'm going to do something manipulative at work today. Not the old definition with the intention to harm somebody, but with my new definition, which is, build relationships through empathy and be comfortable using your ability to influence. And so I find that, sure, some people take these traits too far. You can be actually manipulative, you can be actually reckless, and you can be actually selfish. But I'm encouraging you to use these traits in a sane and savvy way to supercharge your chances of success, because they are words that create the bars of an invisible cage that keep you small. And I want you to stop playing small and start playing smart.
Yeah. So it's not that we shouldn't have guardrails on these, right? It's okay to have guardrails, but I also like the way that you approach the nuance of these and sort of bring some new life to the definitions. Was there one? Actually, let's loop back to the trait trap that actually went along with the cover title. So there was an issue that you yourself was kind of suffering from, right?
Yeah, I would say it was maybe the combination of nosy and obsessed. Obsessed is push, perform, persist, and nosy is get insatiably curious. So we worked with an outside designer, and we had all these great designs, and I wanted to get nosy. I was like, I want to see more. Okay, we've got like 75 incredible designs. I'm like, great. What else is out there, right? Like, let's throw some more spaghetti on the wall. Let's just have more expansive thinking before we get, into narrowing it down. So I really had to check myself before I wrecked myself. And then obsessed was again, the definition of that is push, perform, persist. And, I was pushing really hard. Let's see more. What would be the harm in doing more? Let's get more data. Let's pull more people on this, more, better, better, better. And that really can lead to potentially harmed relationships. And we never got at that point. But I remember having this conversation with my editor, who's just incredible. And I was like, Lydia, I am falling into a trait trap. I am pushing too much. I think I had to sleep on it and realize that we had so many good options and that it did not make sense to just keep doing more and more and more. And I love this yellow color burst on the cover that ended up being the cover. But, you do run the risk of taking these traits too far, though most people, I will reiterate, most people don't take them far enough. It's hard for someone to be selfish, to be their own champion and to go to the yoga class rather than skipping that, Tuesday night bedtime with their kids, even though they put their kids to bed 7 days a week, but they won't be selfish to do that one yoga class, even though they need it to recharge, or they won't be reckless enough, right? You said, what's better, asking for forgiveness or asking for permission? Absolutely asking for forgiveness. And I find that most people just still have this innate desire to people please, and therefore they need to ask for permission. But I want you to give yourself permission because nobody else will if you don't first, and nobody else should or nobody else needs to. So most people need the push, the wild courage to dial these traits up. Most people do not need to dial them back. Most people need the push to dial them up.
So in general, is this that people are we too timid in general or too fearful? What is driving that, as you said, we're not pushing these boundaries enough that we kind of are holding back on all of these?
Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, and the desire to people please or to do things like everybody else is doing. Right. And we're conditioned in elementary school and high school. Right. I see it with my 9-year-old daughter. Like, I don't want to wear that. Nobody else wears that. And then that just continues when you're in a corporate environment or an adult life where we're just conditioned to be like everybody else, which worked great on the savannah, right? This tiny little community. If, I don't want to stick my neck out because that could mean I'm a lion's lunch. But in this giant world with 8 billion people and at competitive organizations where lots of top performers are to your left and to your right, the way to quote unquote survive that is not on the savannah is to stick out, to be a little bit weird, to be a little bit shameless, and to kick your imposter syndrome to the curb, or, weird is authenticity.
Do you have any thoughts about a process that a reader could use to get into each of these chapters? Like, is there a particular way that I could find? Like, I particularly like the weird chapter. I thought that weirdness is a really good thing. I like that standout concept. But are there ways that you think readers should kind of go, this is how I can tap into that for myself? Is there sort of I'm not sure if I'm asking the question right. No.
Oh, absolutely. There's for sure a way you can tap into it yourself, because let's be honest, most people are not going to tap into it by leveraging their wild courage to chase a stranger off the subway and ask them, if they want to go on a date. So I think, Tim, what I hear you asking, which a lot of people are curious about, is how do I start small? How do I have just an ounce of wild courage each day? And one way you can do that is to play it hot. Play it hot, whatever that means for you. So play it hot is basically recognizing that, unlike high school, the real world is too crowded or competitive to wait to be noticed. So be visible, sit in the front row in your VP's town hall, or diplomatically disagree with your boss, or, put your name. Here's one. Put your name on a PowerPoint presentation so that if it gets floated up to the, higher echelons of your company, people know where it came from, right? I call this watermarking your work. Play it hot. Just do something that makes you stand out a little bit. And standing out does not mean chasing somebody off the subway. It means being willing to put yourself out there with your ideas, or having your voice heard, or even just raising your hand to ask somebody a question in, an all hands or a quarterly review, or sitting next to your boss's peer so you get to build a relationship with them in a meeting. It really can be playing it hot in a very minor way. Go ahead, Tim.
You don't have to create a music video for an application that is otherwise filled out by just a form online. but
Right.
but in your
And
case, you did.
yours truly has done that. Yeah. But like not everyone's going to create a music video to apply for an award at work. Which was, by the way, one of my most shameful moments initially, and then turned into something really productive.
Yeah. But to that point, you also talk in the book about, people standing out in their application when you were at Google and you got applications in, and, as opposed to the hundreds of people that are just plain vanilla, the ones that stand out in a certain way, right? You don't want to stand out in the negative way, but if you stand out in a positive way, it can be separating and having that aspect of that. You want to tell the story about the person who you picked from, this large pool of people?
Yeah. So I was interviewing for a role, which I did, many times. And this person, Carly, stood out because at the bottom of her resume, it said this sentence: in constant pursuit of the perfect oatmeal raisin cookie recipe. And I was like,
Boom.
how fun is that? Like, let's map that against the traits for just a sec here. So she was being nosy. She's always like trying to find the best recipe. She was being obsessed, right? She wants the best, not mediocre. She was being reckless, taking a risk that wasn't strictly necessary to not just put to not just put her work history. She was being weird and authentic by saying, not just saying foodie and saying something a little bit more specific. So all these things just really stood out in this teeny tiny little way that she was playing it hot. And of course, she had the background, she had the business chops. And when she interviewed, the personality matched that special vibe of weird matched what she had written on the resume. And so it was just a slam dunk and one of the best hires I've made at Google. It's so funny. She and I, we're not in touch regularly, but she happened to DM me on LinkedIn today because I talked about this in an interview with CNBC. And then all these people were reaching out to her yesterday and today saying like, hey, there can't be that many Carlys at Google. Her name's spelled in an unusual way. And so it's so funny that you bring this up because this just got a bunch of airtime, this little story this week.
Well, I do want to know though from Carly, like, does she have the best recipe? Because that is something I can you reach out to her and then let us know, and we'll make sure that.
Or is it a constant pursuit? Like, is there no end?
Right. Like, is she always chasing? Like I talked about at the beginning.
Yeah. I gave up chasing the best cheesecake recipe because I think I found it. And so
amazing.
Check. I'm done.
Amazing.
Hey, this is Kurt, and we want to say thanks for listening to Behavioral Grooves. And we hope that you're enjoying this episode, but it feels a little bit one-sided. You're hearing from us, but we're not hearing from you.
This is Tim, and we have two suggestions to remedy that. The first is join our Facebook page and engage with us.
We want to talk with you. We want to hear your perspectives, and hopefully our Facebook page might be the place to have some of that interaction. So please come and join us.
The other recommendation we have for you is to leave us a quick rating. The little 5-star thing at the bottom of your app, or a short review. Just leave us a few words about what you like about Behavioral Grooves. We'd very much appreciate it.
Thanks, and we now return you to our regularly scheduled programming.
Earlier, Jenny, we were talking about we were talking about sort of the role of curiosity, and I'm kind of curious, and this is slightly zoomed out, but you were talking about how curiosity is being sort of ground out of us as children. Do you think that it's a cultural thing too? Are we, as a culture, do you think that we're sort of losing this natural sense of curiosity?
Yes. I think yes, because I think we're just talking to each other less. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is how social media is playing a role here. And I think when you interact with other people, when you're building genuine relationships, you can't help but be curious. Like, again, think back to, I'm not sure why I'm talking so much about my dating life on this podcast, but like I would go on a horrible first date and I would, like, the way I would enjoy the date is I would just ask questions the entire time. I remember going with this one guy who was like,
wait, this is the horrible date? The horrible date you would ask?
Yeah. Because here's what I did. So I this one guy was a criminal prosecutor. And I was like, okay, I knew from second one, this was not going to be a second date. But I was like, a criminal prosecutor? How fascinating. When am I going to spend 45 minutes with a criminal prosecutor again, or an hour and a half, whatever the date was? And so I just remember trying to use the time to get as nosy as possible. What and how questions win the day, right? So what's the most interesting part about being a criminal prosecutor? And you can use this with your boss. You can use this with clients, right? Always what and how, never yes or no, or minimal yes or no. What's the hardest part about being a criminal prosecutor? How has it impacted your life outside of work? Because I imagine it could be really draining. What do you love most about it? What have you learned the most? I just treated it like an opportunity to be a sponge and learn as much about this industry that I'd had probably very little exposure to beyond this date as possible. So why do I think, bringing it back, that we're maybe getting less curious as a society? I think social media is keeping us away from actual humans. And the more we doom scroll and get people's updates, the more we're just consuming information versus participating in the conversation with real humans at a coffee shop in real life, or our communities, or our places of worship, or the happy hour at work, which it's so hard post-pandemic to get any people to come to a team building event. And I know you both have done work in this space, and employee engagement and retention and culture in offices. We just saw this huge shift post pandemic. But because I was sitting across from this person at a restaurant, it gave me an opportunity to be curious, an opportunity to be nosy. And I gained a lot from it, though not a second date. And that was just fine.
Not a second date. It wasn't going there. It's interesting.
I'm not sure what he gained, by the way.
He could have been asking you questions. Right?
Here's the thing. Well, this is why the nosy chapter is so helpful at work. It's about getting insatiably curious. It's about spinning the spotlight on somebody else. It's about wooing with you, right? Starting your sentences in your emails to somebody with you as much as you can, as opposed to I, right? You led a great podcast today. Let's say I'm sending you a follow-up email. You led a great podcast. You ask such interesting questions. You are pros at what you do. So you're smiling right now. You love it. I'm wooing. I'm wooing with you.
I'm getting a little warm fuzzy.
You are going to go far with this podcast. You have all the skills it takes to be huge, right? Whatever it is. Or the typical follow-up note might be, I had so much fun in your podcast. I thought that it was a really interesting conversation. I enjoyed being there, right? So the first version you liked a lot better. I could see it in your face. And so
dramatically.
Yeah. And so woo with you and avoiding writing your sentences with I is a very practical tool that you can use to win clients, to win over your boss at work, to, improve your relationships. And the problem with this strategy on that date was he probably loved it. He was probably like, I'm feeling great. She is so interested. She is so thoughtful. In reality, I was just being frankly manipulative. And I was trying to leverage that time in a way that was productive for me, because I would have rather learned about something in this industry as opposed to talk about myself. And so in some ways it was manipulative for the benefit of me and my own learning and my own curiosity. But he walked away, I think, really feeling like, oh, I want to see this person. I'm going to stop this story. This is not at all.
He's going to be listening and he's going to be going, oh my gosh, I remember that.
This guy is.
I'm curious. Did it end with oh, I want to have a second date with you so that I can ask you at least one question?
I mean, I think.
Or did you just no, we're not going there.
No, we did not go out again. I don't remember. I do remember that he did want to go out again. I mean, I don't remember this guy's name. I just remember this situation. But the point that hopefully will maybe a tiny bit is useful to you is that when you show curiosity in somebody else, it does make you more likable. It helps you build relationships. It moves the business forward. And that is my favorite part of being nosy. Just genuinely curious about somebody else.
It's really interesting when you were talking about this idea, the way social media and the idea that we're not getting together has led to some of this lack of curiosity. I also see it in my kids. I see my kids who are never bored. They are not, because they always have some device with them that is, so they're not sitting there in a car watching the road go by on a 3-hour road trip and just having to think about things. And then, the way that you cure that boredom is like, wow, I wonder what is going on outside or whatever that is. And so I don't even know if we're teaching kids that skill set to have that curiosity, because why do I need to be curious? Because things are just showing up here and I don't have to even think about it. I don't know if that fits with what you were saying or not.
It fits beautifully. And this makes me so interested in how this, let me think about this for a second. This makes me think about what makes a good executive. You probably did not think I was going to go there from
no, I did
board
not. There you go.
That's a surprise. Nice left turn.
Left the car is on this 3-hour drive watching the trees go by and left turn. Okay. So to be a good leader, AKA to be bossy, it requires a lot of thinking, planning, ideating, strategizing, dare I call it window gazing. And so we all know that oftentimes our best ideas come to us when we are window gazing or on a walk in the woods, right? I live here in Boulder and I try to get out for a walk in the mountains, almost every day. And so many of my best ideas come from just this quote unquote window gazing, like your son or like we all experienced as kids on these 3-hour drives. And even if you're not the CEO of your company, the more you can give yourself permission to be, air quotes, bored, meaning you're not distracted by something else, meaning you're not bored, you're busy, right? You're busy replying to a bunch of emails. You're busy hustling back and forth to meetings. You're busy scurrying to, add some comments in a doc or a slide. So if you think about window gazing as something that is productive and strategic and the white space thinking, that is going to make you a better executive. Because if you're just stuck in meetings back to back all day, honestly, if I see a CEO bustling around, that is like a sign to sell my shares. I want the person who is strategically thinking, and that is window gazing. That is quiet time to get nosy, to get curious, to plan and strategize. And that's what I think we are missing a lot of.
I would even go, I would say that is not just a leader problem. That is a everyday person problem. And I think there is a component of this where it is that permission, because we live in a culture, I think too, that like promotes that hustle, that you always have to be grinding, that you always have to be doing, and that sitting and watching things out the window or just taking time for yourself is not that. And even when it does come to that, it's like, oh, I have to do my 15 minutes of meditation today, and I have to do it this way. And those are aspects that, they can be beneficial, but it doesn't give you that opportunity and that permission to just say, I just need to just stop and just, not have anything distract me and just be here with me and whatever else is going on. So
yeah, and I thank you for bringing it home there, Kurt. You landed the plane that I was on final approach, but never quite. I got the flaps.
You got it.
You got it.
You were there,
right?
You were there,
right? No, I was starting to say like it's not just for the CEO. I mean, I think here's the thing. Here's what gets you to CEO. Here's what gets you to CEO, or whatever it is that you want to be. Here's what gets you the promotion or the salary raise or the increase, right? It is not being the person who responds to every email without fail. It is not being the person who attends every meeting without fail. Carving out time in our calendar to even just like open up a blank document and write down, what do we want to start, stop, and continue next quarter for the team. Even if you're not the CEO or you never aspire to be the CEO, you probably want maybe more recognition, more responsibility, more money, because hot damn, who doesn't? And the activities that get you there are not the bustling around, or the equivalent of our kids being in the car constantly busy with something. The activities that get you there are the window gazing, even if the window gazing looks like opening up a doc and writing down some really big picture questions and answers, but like 2 hours a quarter. We're not like, people don't do this enough. So anyway.
Yeah. I'm curious if in your work at Google, and with other friends, family, people that in the corporate world. Is there one chapter in the book? Again, we've been talking about like bossy and a lot here, but is there a chapter that's like, oh man, this chapter really addresses a big problem in the corporate world right now. Everybody should make sure that they read this particular chapter. Is there one that stands out for you?
The one I've found resonating most with audiences like yours is brutal, because these are students, these are people who are, at different stages in their career, and a common thread that runs through all these folks is how hard it is to embrace the power of no, to avoid the desire to people please, and to just do what's right for you and what in your heart is the right thing to do. So, for example, I have a friend, Kim, who 3 days before her wedding called off the wedding. 3 days, right? Sent the gifts back, didn't get a refund from the caterer, from the band, whatever it was. Yeah. But she knew that she had to be brutal, and that tough 3-minute conversation with her fiance and then sending that email that we all got saying the wedding is off was going to be 24 hours, 72 hours of pain. But that she was saving herself from 72 months of a terrible marriage. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard, whether it is, work context, avoiding nap work, which is not actually promotable work, which kind of gets to like all that busyness. Right. And focusing more on those big projects that require the window gazing, like the 2025 marketing plan, or improving the customer satisfaction metric by 15%. Like that is the stuff that matters. But the NAP work, NAP, not actually promotable work, is the stuff that just takes up all your time. It's busy work. It's the meetings. It's taking notes in the meeting because somebody asked you to, and you didn't want to push back because you felt bad and you wanted to be a team player and you wanted to be a good teammate. And all those things matter. But in your career, if you're doing too much nap work, then you are not going to be putting yourself in an advantageous position for the next level of responsibility or promotion. And so the reason it requires being brutal is because it's hard to say to your manager, you know what, I planned the company offsite last quarter. I had a blast doing it. I think it would be better for somebody else to do it so I can focus on the big marketing project. Yeah. And that's being brutal. It's being brutal with, just like Kim was brutal about, this isn't going to work, right? This marriage is not going to work. Being brutal about your time, your energy, what you say no to. I have 8 scripts people can download to say no to meetings, projects, and favors, which sometimes people just need the words. So that's why I love sharing scripts.
We had another guest, and Tim, I can't remember exactly who it is now. I feel horrible about that.
That's weird. That never happens to you, Kurt.
Oh my God, early onset, dementia here. I know, but the element of being a people pleaser, and Tim and I both scored really high on the scale that they had, and I think that this being brutal is a really important piece, because it is difficult. It is one of those things that it hits you at a gut level that isn't, I can just kind of get over that. It's hard because that's how we've been raised, and the elements of all of those factors. And to your point, I loved how you actually stated that last piece about talking to your boss about not going on that. It's actually, if you reframe how you think about this, it can be beneficial. It's not you being negative. It's a beneficial thing for somebody else. And you can rethink things if you just open up your eyes to look at things at a broader perspective.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a particular story that you tell in the book that really got my attention because A, it's a musical story, and B, it's not commonly known. It's the story of Claire Torrey, who was the vocalist on Dark Side of the Moon, right? So she comes into the studio. She's hired by Pink Floyd to come into the studio, and she sings The Great Gig in the Sky. She does this fantastic freestyle vocal, and she gets paid like 30 or 40 pounds or something for it. Yeah. And then later, she finally goes, well, wait a minute, I actually created that. I actually that was my creation, that I should be credited for it. And then she actually sued the band, and I think there was an out of court settlement or
That's right.
something that was not published. I don't know if anybody actually knows what she got, but she is now credited as a co-author of the song.
That's right.
How did you find that story? I'm just kind of curious. It's a pretty great story in the music community again.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is just like years of research of the book, and I love music, and I have, just sort of, we wanted to have some quirky and different stories that covered all industries. Like, I come from tech. I was at Google nearly 18 years, but we wanted to make sure that people were represented in all sorts of walks of life: teachers, musicians, fishing expedition leaders. And, right. What I love about that story, and this is a perfect example, because we talked earlier on in the conversation about, well, what does good look like for these traits? Because they raise eyebrows, right? Selfish, manipulative, shameless, brutal, reckless. And this is selfish. Like, she was being selfish, and she was being smart in the best way possible, because she got paid, you're right, Tim, 30 pounds. Okay. 30 pounds. Okay. And then the album went platinum. It became like one of the most famous songs in the world. And it's because of her legendary vocals that she made up on the spot. So, I call this play to win. What I need now, WINN. Everyone should play to win. You should always play to win. And it doesn't mean that it's harming somebody else. But circumstances can change, right? Maybe last quarter, you were responsible for X amount of work, and now you're responsible for X, Y, and Z amount of work. Play to win. Go to your boss and say, hey, I think I might need a new title to reflect the new work that I'm doing. Or play to win. What I need now. Last year, your partner stayed home and was not able to take on as much responsibility, right? But let me rephrase that. Didn't say that right. Last year, maybe your partner worked in an office, and this year they stay home. Play to win. Ask them to do a couple loads of laundry, right, during the week. And what was so cool about this story from Claire Torrey, who sang this for Pink Floyd, is that she just kind of goes back to beg forgiveness, not permission. She sued them, and it was an out-of-court settlement for an undisclosed sum, and I assume it was significant. And so when you play to win, you, rather than just, again, always trying to people please, you can adjust your goals to what your current situation is. Somebody's working from home, somebody's not. The album hadn't gone platinum, now it has. Your company had a layoff, and they couldn't, afford to pay XYZ salary, but now they can because they've recovered from the terrible financial situation, and now it's time to ask for that raise. So play to win. When the circumstances change, know what needs to change and what you need to ask for.
Things like that, experiences like that in the music industry really changed what the norm is. And so, like, if you, I've been on songwriting expeditions in Nashville, and when you're working with a group of people, if one person adds one word, they're a co-writer. But that didn't happen in the 70s when Pink Floyd was recording. So, like, work like that. So experiences like Claire Torrey's standing up and saying, hey, I'm going to be selfish about this, that changed the norms in the industry in a really positive way. So there's downstream effects.
That's so cool.
We got to know, though, if you were going to spend a year on a desert island and you could bring with you 2 musical catalogs, so all the work that a particular artist did, what 2 musical artists would you bring with you?
All right. Lin-Manuel Miranda and Snow Patrol.
Oh, wow.
Now, those are 2 that I would never have put together, but all right.
It's a mashup, folks. It's a mashup.
Yeah, what the Snow Patrol? I can think of the
Cars,
melody. Dun, 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 da, 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 da. Yeah, okay, fantastic. Yeah. Snow Patrol, okay, and then
I think Snow Patrol just has a soft spot in my heart because it was like one of those bands before they got famous. I was in school in Boston, and we were in this little, like, not coffee shop, this little teeny tiny bar music venue with like 50 people there, and I just love their music. And then I'm just a total musical theater nerd. So Lin-Manuel Miranda or anybody else in the Broadway musical genre. Would love. I'm so excited to see Wicked. Oh,
Yeah.
wait, cut that because this is coming out way, way, way later. So I would say cut the Wicked piece because this will come out way past Wicked.
That's okay. That's okay. It's you and my daughter are like the
Kindred
musical
spirits.
Broadway and Lin-Manuel. I mean,
All the lyrics to Hamilton, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Well, you get that, plus you get all of his work on Encanita. Oh, what was it? Encantada, the movie, the Disney movie.
Encanto.
Encanto, thank
so
you.
good too.
And then you get a number of other factors. I mean, he's done all the other, In the Heights and on all of that. So it's
exactly.
yeah, crazy.
Jenny Wood, it is a pleasure to have you as a guest on Behavior Grooves today.
It was so much fun to be here. Yeah, let's get grooving and behaving differently in a more wildly courageous way.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Beautifully said.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Jenny, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our weird, selfish, shameless, obsessed, nosy, manipulative, brutal, reckless, and bossy brains.
You're playing right into the very first thing I wanted to talk about.
Which is how bossy you are to me all the time.
All the time. Don't you love it though? Because it's a trait trap to think. That's what I want to talk about is trait traps. That the thing is, we give words meaning. We named everything in the whole world. Humans named everything. Didn't have a name before we gave it a name. So we have nosy and curiosity, and we gave those things names. And I think Jenny's a little, trying to encourage us to think about the positive sides of these and to get out of the trait traps and go, oh, that person's nosy. Well, are they more curious?
Right. I think there's also another aspect of that. There's two things. One is words meaning change over time, right? We understand
all the
that.
time.
They mutate, they morph, they do whatever it is. And so there's an aspect of this that who knows, in 100 years, nosy may be a wonderful trait to have. Everybody goes, oh, Tim is so nosy. He's awesome. This is great. Man, he is the bossiest friend I have, and I love it. That could be a real thing. But I think one of the other pieces that I don't know if Jenny, we didn't ask her about this, but they are also, because they have the negative connotation, when you use them in this more positive light, there is a way that we are now, it's like surprising for us. And so we remember it. It has an emotional component to it. So as you're reading through, I was like, when I'm reading the book, I'm like, what? And my emotions were raised. It's like, no, I do not want to be manipulative. I mean, that was the one that stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's like, that just feels like icky and ew, bossy, I get, nosy, okay, right? Manipulative just felt bad, but it stuck with me. And now I remember it. And so now it makes that learning aspect of it that much more powerful.
Yeah. It's a great little novelty, right, to introduce into our lives, is to think about, if we're going to name something and use these names, that it's okay to pull ourselves out of the norm and to use some of this kind of terminology that reshapes the way we think about it.
Yeah.
I felt the same way. Well, almost. I mean, when I read manipulative, I thought, well, that's just me. That's just, No.
I thought for sure you were going to say, well, that's Kurt right there. No. He's the manipulative asshole that he is.
But it absolutely does give us the opportunity to reshape. And it gets to a point of how important it is for us to think about where we are in the world and how we want to continue to shape our world.
Yeah.
Right? How do we want to find our groove? How do we want to shape the way our life is? And what are the words that we want to choose and the meanings that we want to give them? I mean, it's literally that personal, right?
Yeah. I think that part about choosing how you want to use them is really key. As we think about the language that we use, we've talked about this in the past. Language is important. The words we choose matter. You can't just replace one word for another and expect it to get the same results. We know that from some of the work that we had with
Gary Latham.
Gary Latham, thank you. And all of this is, I think, important to think about. And I really like how Jenny brings this point to bear, is that we have to be intentional and that we shouldn't just get stuck into this.
Yeah. I do have a question, though, that these brash terms, these rather non-traditional ways of thinking about it. Is that good? Is it good for the world overall for us to think about brutal, for instance, or manipulative as being traits that we might find positive?
That's a really great question. And I wonder okay, we can go deep here, I think.
Sorry,
but that's a really good question, because those words, even if we change them for ourselves, have a societal understanding, right? There is a definition that the vast majority of society has. Even as words change, there is a residual aspect of those words. And so if we start talking about people becoming more brutal or more manipulative, even if we're intending that to be in that positive aspect that Jenny points out, are there other impacts of that? Does that change how we actually act? So I might try to be nosy in the curiosity perspective, but if I talk about it and eschew that to the rest of the world, does curiosity then become kind of the more of the nosy piece? And maybe we should just stick with more traditional terms like be curious, have some self-efficacy about, protecting your time, some of those other aspects.
Well, at the same time, I think about a word like cool. In the English language, in the 1950s, if you said he is cool, that implied that person, that male person that you're referring to, is icy or removed, distant, right? That person is cool. That they're somewhat aloof, maybe
reserved,
reserved,
distant.
Whereas then through the 1960s, the younger generation at the time starts to use cool, meaning that's a desirable trait. That's something that offsets you as someone who is unique in a positive way. And that changes to the point where we can use cool to actually refer to both. Like you could say, well, he was cool in my first discussion with him. He reacted rather coolly, and meaning he was kind of reserved, but you could say, man, that guy's cool. And, and you think, well, now we're talking about cool in a different way. And context, of course, matters, and the inflection matters. But is that something that we desire? I guess that's an open question I'm curious of.
It's fascinating when we think about language and how it gets used, but then thinking about the priming effects that has on our brain. So even this idea that cool is a desirable aspect has some underlying implications in then how we view that person. And that parlays back to the first definition of cool that you use, that more distant aspect of it. So we have to be very thoughtful about how we use those terms. And I think oftentimes we are not. And I think that lends itself into, I mean, it's not like probably going to burn the world down, but there are those way that we use language and interpret language, and the underlying psychological processes that languages have is really important. And if we're not aware, if we are just flippantly using words in manners that are driving maybe just a little bit of counterproductive behaviors or thinking within the people that we're talking to or writing to, or however we're communicating with them, then we probably should try to be more conscious and at least be aware that what we're doing.
Yeah, good point. Especially in poetic, if we're kind of stretching the poetic meanings of some of these words. So that's just
I wax poetically on all the time,
constantly.
and my word choice often is misunderstood because I can't pronounce the words to the first place, so I say a different word than the one I'm meaning, and or I misunderstand the definition of the word, and therefore I'm using it in the totally wrong context and thinking I'm making wonderful sense, and people just laugh at me.
But it's one of our strongest suits. I'm a great abuser of the English language, and it's just one of the things that I do really, really well.
Yeah, so we're both good abusers of the language. There we go. You're on purpose, me on accident. There you go.
Yeah, right. So when she talked about brutal, scripts for being brutal, she gave this example of she said, okay, so to tell the boss, I planned the company offsite last quarter. I had a blast doing it. I think it would be better for somebody else so that I can really focus on this big marketing project. And she said, yeah, that's being brutal. And I think about so often times in the real corporate world that I've lived in, rarely do you have the ability to say, so I can focus on this other big project or to focus on this thing, because everything in the boss's spectrum and purview is important. And everybody else on the team has got something else big to do. So the one little gnawing that I had in the back of my brain on this was, I don't know if we can ever claim the higher ground. If we're going to say, I'm not going to do this non-promotable work. Someone else is going to have to do that. I feel like it's better just to sort of leave it with, I think it'd be great if someone else did it this year. Period.
I think there is value in giving reason. It justifies. We know that the experiment that I love about making copies.
The copy
breaking
machine
into the line. The fact that, like, if you just say, "Hi, can I skip in front of you because I need to make copies," just by putting the because I need to make copies in there, you're much more likely to have that person say, "Sure, here you go."
It's a fantastic
of course,
study.
if you're breaking in a line, I'm going in the copy line. What else am I going to be doing?
Everybody's making copies. Everybody's waiting to make copies.
So I think there's value in that, in giving a reason, in stating that I know that for me, this marketing project is a big, important thing for me. And so for me to be able to focus on this, I need to give this up. And it might be a great opportunity for somebody else. And there might be, and I know you think everybody's busy, but sometimes there are people who might be in a lull. We have the peaks and valleys of work and productivity. And so there might be a person who, hey, this is a lull and this would be a great fit. And if the boss is aware and understanding of that, then they can hopefully make that assignment and move things around. So you're not having certain people burnt out and other people bored. So I would say, no, Tim, I disagree with you. I want to have the rationale for that.
Okay. All righty. We're going to have to agree to disagree.
Oh, just quit being so brutal, you bossy, nosy, manipulative man.
Can I bring up the Claire Torrey story?
All right. Quickly remind people, Claire Torrey, what we talked about.
Okay. So she was a vocalist in the 1960s and 70s in England. And when Pink Floyd went in to record a Great Gig in the Sky, she gets called in to ad lib a part. She ends up singing some words with it, with this, and she made it up on the spot. And it's an interesting thing about the way music gets created these days, especially in studios. Do you mind if I just go into this for just a minute?
No, wax poetically about this, man.
Okay, so like the Nashville rule is, if you've got a bunch of people in a room and they're writing a song, and one person says, no, that word shouldn't be Bob, it should be it. and everybody agrees, oh, that's the change that we should make. That person's a co-writer. They're automatically you change one word, you're a co-writer. And so that makes it a co-write. That gives you
Is
license.
That even like, all right, so you have it in here. It needs to be plural and its. Does that count?
Well, that probably, because Nashville songwriters want to be pretty particular about that.
Okay.
So that's sort of the norm. However, if you're just brought into, if you're a drummer,
a musician,
yeah, you're a musician, you're playing on the track, and nobody says, okay, to the drummer, now you need to make sure that the kick is on 2 and 4, and the snare is going to be on 1 and 3, and then I want you to make sure that every third measure you're hitting the high snare, and on the fourth measure you're hitting the high snare and the low snare. It's just not that specific. You've got a basic structure, and a bass player is given a chart with where the chords are, and then they work out where those notes fit. Those people are not co-writers of the song. They are not entitled to royalties by creating a bass part for a song.
Even if they were to wax poetically, musically, if I can say that, right? And did a flourish that, wow, that's the part that makes the song stand out.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. That could be like the most, under pressure, the bass part for Under Pressure, right? I think that was Nathan East that played that. It's like, he's not a co-writer by coming up with that bass part. That's sort of the protocol. And so Claire Torrey's story is interesting because she brought some words into it. And it was in a time when the things were less defined, I suppose, from a protocol perspective about what's going to happen in the studio, because it just wasn't that defined. But I think that she was right to win the suit and get a settlement because of the words, however soft the words were.
And now this is in these cases of musicians not getting it because of that. That depends on, like, if it's a band, the band might decide that everybody gets a songwriting credit because they're doing that, even if it was one person who basically did the demo track and laid everything down, and then they just came in and added their own unique component to it. And in other cases, it is just chosen. That's not the way it's done. So it's just dependent upon the individual and the band. Is that how that typically works?
And the situation. Queen was a band that was notorious for writing together. That it wasn't just Brian May or Freddie Mercury just writing the whole thing. Sometimes that was the case, but in some cases, they're like, we're not sure where this goes. Help fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Or there would be a significant change. Let's change it up here. Let's do something different.
Well, and I heard, and again, we're totally off topic, but you like this music stuff. But I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you know this, Beatles, Lennon and McCartney often got writing lyric references, and sometimes it was all Paul and sometimes it was all John, but they just did this. But then when there was a Yellow Submarine or another one where they would bring in Ringo or George, right there, that would be changed. But do you know that? Am I?
From what I understand, it was a gentleman's agreement between Paul and John early on that anything that the two of them wrote while they were in the Beatles was going to be a Lennon and McCartney song.
Yeah.
Even if one did all of the writing and the other one did nothing on it. And they did that. They upheld that agreement throughout their entire period with the Beatles. Only after the Beatles did they actually start to say, this is just a Paul McCartney song and this is just a John Lennon song. And you're right. Like Octopus's Garden is a great example where Ringo comes to the band and says, here, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And they actually helped him write it. They helped him arrange it and write it. But Ringo is credited as the songwriter.
Yeah, it's fascinating how
Yeah.
that works and various different things.
Boy, we really are
Okay.
off topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Now
Okay.
back to our regularly programmed episode, grooving session here.
Yes.
Anyway, I think it's really interesting, and I really like what Jenny was saying
Yeah.
about again, the words are provocative. They're brash. They bring this to mind, but what the message is behind this is, you know what? We need to take time out of our day. We need to slow down. We need to stand up for ourselves. We need to have curiosity. We need to say no more often. We need to be forthright. We need to not, hold things that bother us to our vest. We need to do all of these things, right? We need to have this obsession around what we're doing and focus and different things. And sometimes we just need to, take a risk. We need to go out there and not, eat my perfectly, well balanced breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and maybe just have some ice cream every once in a while, right?
Every once in a while, yeah. Every once in a while.
And of course, I need to be bossy over you, and you need to be bossy over me. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't know if that's not all that super likely, but standing up, right, identifying with what's important to us and expressing that is absolutely important.
Yeah.
And when it comes to expression, if you listeners, groovers, if you've got something to express, you want to engage us, check out our Facebook page.
Woohoo! Yeah, that's a great way to be curious about,
to be curious, to be seen, to be brutal. Actually, if you want to, we have the Behavioral Groove community on Facebook, and we would love for you to join us.
Yeah, lots of fun kind of comments, and we try to respond to everybody out there. So if you have a question or just a statement, we'd love to hear from you on that.
And if we don't respond, it means that we don't like you. Just to let you know.
It just means that we're selfish and we're brutal about that and different pieces. No, it's all good. So hopefully you took something from today, even our conversation about music at the end here that waxed poetically about how you get credited with different pieces. And you can use that as you go out and find your groove.